G'day drivers, it's Al here from Drive Another Day. Been a little bit busy, so haven't updated or done a video for quite some time, but I'm back for the short term, and in the latest video, we're going to take a look at cleaning out the IACV on one of these, the mighty Stag, helping out a bit of a irregular idle, especially when you put the air conditioning on, and it's something you can do in the comfort of your own garage. It doesn't take you very, very long, a little bit dirty, but let's get into it, shall we? Now, up until a few months ago, I hadn't had any need to work on the IACV. Things were going nicely until the first day back after some holidays, driving to work, and the car spluttered, coughed, and died at a roundabout. And of course, you fear the worst. What's gone wrong? Is it the coil packs? Is it something else? Has something blown up? Have I destroyed this block? All of those questions racing through your mind when you're trying to start the car and get it out of harm's way. Started the car, ignition would just drop. It wouldn't hold either. Started it again, foot down, high revs got me around the corner, but as soon as I took my foot off the accelerator, it would just conk out once again. Limped it up a hill, parked it to the side and called the RACQ, and then had a bit of a look around to see if I could work out myself what was causing this issue. And I unplugged a few different things. I tried a few different things to try and suss where it was coming from. Any vacuum hoses that may not have been connected. I've had that problem before. Couldn't work out what it was until the RACQ mechanic popped around for a bit of a look, and eventually he diagnosed it as a stretched throttle cable. Tightened it up, started it up, things were good to go again. Got to work, apologised for being late, that was the end of the story. However, over the next few days, I noticed that the revs were slightly down, and every time you put the air conditioner on, you'd get this really weird revs bounce just happening, and a strange idle going along with that too. And I thought, okay, well, I've been wanting to do this job for a while now. Now I have definite reason. Let's see if we can get it back to where it was, nice and smooth, before the throttle cable had to be adjusted and threw things slightly out of whack. So the tools you'll need to get the IACV off before we even clean it are pretty common. A 10mm spanner, ratcheting, non-ratcheting, it's entirely up to you. I use a ratcheting one. It is a tool that I've used time and time again for plenty of projects on the Stag as well as other cars. So yeah, it's very, very handy to have. For the bottom two 10mm bolts, there's 4 in total. I had to use a 10mm socket because there wasn't enough room to swing a normal flat spanner. Also, some kind of grips or locking pliers to help with the hose connectors, depending on how stiff they are. And that's basically it in terms of getting the pipework off and the bolts out so you can actually remove this to clean it. To clean it, you're also going to need a can of Carby cleaner. And I found an old toothbrush and a couple of cotton buds were very, very helpful in clearing all the carbon and the gunk out. And you should have some of those in your bathroom. If not, they're fairly cheap at the supermarket too. A couple of optional extras, a towel underneath the pipework when you remove the coolant hoses. You may get a dribble or two of coolant, so it's always handy to have a towel stuffed under there before you take them off, just in case anything comes out. Being in a warm climate like I am, based in Gold Coast, Queensland, didn't have an issue. All my pipes were nice and dry, so nothing came out when I took the hoses off, but you may be in an area where you need that fluid to really work things up. And so there may be a dribble, just be aware of that. And on top of that, you may or may not need a replacement gasket for the one that's sandwiched between the IACV and the back of the block. Sometimes they come away in one piece and you can use them again. Sometimes, like mine, they will fall to absolute pieces. I don't think it's been off since factory. So mine fell to absolute bits and I had to use a screwdriver and a paint scraper to get the old remnants of the gasket off various parts. And so when it comes to replacing it, you've got a couple of choices. You can go out and buy the proper gasket for it. If you've got a Neo block like I do, the Nissan part number that you're going to need is Nissan 23785-AA000. Alternatively, you can use a gasket sealant. And I had a spare tube of Permatex Black. This worked wonders when I was replacing a gasket years ago on a WRX, and I thought this will work just perfectly in this application too, and it did. So either a replacement gasket or a gasket sealer, something to have the gasket there if yours falls to pieces like mine did. So first things first, we're going to remove the top 3 hoses. There are 4 hoses in total, 3 small, 1 large, and we're going to leave the big fat one for the very end. So get the connectors out of the way, and then just a slow, steady pull will be more than enough to get the hoses off the top. We're going to disconnect the wires to the plug that is part of the unit as well. That's very, very easy to find. You're looking for a grey plug with the two wires, red and black. That comes away pretty easily. Then we're going to disconnect the larger hose connected at the bottom, and the unit is now free and ready to go. As you can see, 70% of my gasket was still attached to it. The other 30% just basically crumbled. So can't really use this again. So I spent the next half an hour chipping away at it just to make sure that it was all clear before I put some Permatex Black on it. Cleaning this unit is very, very simple. Plenty of doses of carby cleaner and a good scrubbing with the brush should free up most of the stuff. I used the cotton wool buds to basically bend into corners and recesses that I couldn't reach with the brush. And after a little bit of work, things will come up cleaner than they've ever been in the last 19 years. A little bit brighter too, and that's ready to go back on there. So we'll pop the new gasket in, or the old recycled gasket, or in my case, some Permatex Black, back on the IACV. Reconnect the big fat hose to the end of it, and then we line it up to where it was. Now, just be aware of not tightening up any of the bolts until you've got all 4 bolts almost in, because it does involve a little bit of jiggling around and making sure it's absolutely lined up perfectly before all 4 bolts slot in properly. And you will be swearing a bit if you tighten up a couple first and then think, why can't I put bolts 3 and 4 in? Why aren't they going in? You've got to make sure that they're all lined up correctly before you tighten them all up. Once that's done, you plug in the grey switch once again, connect the 3 coolant hoses, put on the connectors back in place as well. And we're going to bleed the coolant system just to make sure that there's no air in the system now that we've taken the hoses off. There is a bolt on top of the unit. It's next to the little sticker to bleed the coolant off air. Take the bolt off, start the car, wait till a little bit of coolant comes out, stop the car, put the bolt back in. Well bled. No more air in our system. So now that our IACV is all clean, all good to go, bolted back in place, you've double checked that everything's connected and ready to roll, what we're going to do next is tune up our idle. And we want to tune it up without the assistance of the TPS. We want to get the revs set just on the IACV alone without the assistance from the TPS. So when the engine is nice and cold, what we're going to do is disconnect the TPS, which is the brown plug in the center of a Neo block, and you'll find it towards the back. Disconnect that, start the car. You may get a couple of warning lights flash up on your dash, basically pointing out that your TPS is disconnected, and it may struggle to start as well. Mine did get there, held idle, bit of a rough idle without the help of the TPS, obviously, but we want to tune things up without its assistance so it stays disconnected for now. We let the car warm up to its usual temp, so when the needle gets to the halfway point on your gauges, and then we adjust the idle with a little stubby screwdriver, and you can see the adjustment hole here. Turning the screwdriver clockwise will lower your revs, and counterclockwise obviously brings them up. And I kept turning until I got my idle back to 800, 900 RPM. Depending on where you are, the load on the battery and everything else, yours might need to be higher or lower, but that's how you do it. Clockwise lowers the revs, counterclockwise brings them up. Once you get to a happy level, plug back in your TPS, and that's all we need to do. Now, if plugging back your TPS throws things out marginally, you can adjust again via the stubby screwdriver. Just make sure the TPS is plugged in this time so that the settings are involved when both units are working together. But otherwise, doing this, cleaning out my IACV, brought back my idle back to a normal level, and also stopped the strange bounce and engine sound when I put the air conditioning on. So that has been a win-win all round.